Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jai Vishnupad Paramahansa Paravatikacharya Sutta Sri Srimad Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON BBD Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Vishnupad Paramahansa Paravatikacharya Sutta Sri Srimad Divine Grace Bhaktivedanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai. Ananta Gaudiya Vaishnavrinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Shlahadadas Thakur Ki Jai. Ho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasati Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopinath Shamakunda Radhakunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai. Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai. Navadvip Mayapur Dham Ki Jai. Ganga Jamunamai Ki Jai. Tulasi Devi Maharani Ki Jai. Bhakti Devi Ki Jai. Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. All glorious to the assembled devotees. All glorious to the assembled. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So we're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, 3rd Canto, Chapter 16, text number 28. Right? Okay. Bhagavantam parikramya pranipacyanumanya pratijagmu pramuditaha samsanto vaishnavim shriyam Bhagavantam parikramya pranipacyanumanya pratijagmu pramuditaha samsanto vaishnavim shriyam Bhagavantam parikramya pranipacyanumanya pratijagmu pramuditaha samsanto vaishnavim shriyam. Vaishnavis. Bhagavantam, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Parikramya, after circumambulating, Pranipatya, after offering obeisances, Anumanya, after learning, Cha, and Pratijagmu, returned, Pramuditaha, extremely delighted, Samshantaha, glorifying, Vaishnavim, of the Vaishnavas, Shriyam, opulence. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. The sages circumambulated the Supreme Lord, offered their obeisances, and returned, extremely delighted at learning of the divine opulences of the Vaishnava. Purport. It is still a respectful practice to circumambulate the Lord in Hindu temples. Especially in Vaishnava temples, there is an arrangement for people to offer their respects to the deity and circumambulate the temple at least 3 times. Om Ganatamanam Dasha Jananjana Shalakaya Chakshura Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutles Rayam Rupagadamayam Dadapti Swapadantikam. So we're going to say something about this, and then we're also going to go on to the next verse. But okay, so the point I wanted to talk about in this of this verse is this, and it's in the translation where it mentions that the 4 Kumars were extremely delighted at learning of the divine opulences of the Vaishnava. So what is the divine opulence of the Vaishnava? Probably many divine opulences of Vaishnava, but the thought that came to my mind was that the closeness of their relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Now, stop and think about it. Lord Narayan, these Jaya and Vijaya servants in Vaikuntha, and Krishna wants to do this pastime. So Krishna didn't, first of all, get together with them because they were his servants. He could have got together with them and said, hey, look, guys, here's the plan. I really want to do a different pastime. I just have a desire to kind of, fight it up a little bit in the material world. So I'm going to arrange for you 2 guys to get cursed by these sages that are going to come, and then you're going to take birth in the material world a few times, and we're going to fight, and it's going to be good, and you're going to come back here. He didn't tip him off, right? There's no place where earlier, and I don't think I missed anything. He didn't kind of, give him a warning or anything like that. Because why? Because they're like this. The Lord and His devotees, they're so close, they're so intimately related that He knew He didn't have to. I'll give you an example. So, like here in this temple, Bhakta Jimmy, you've been a devotee here, about 6 months? Yeah, so when Bhakta Jimmy first came, I thought, well, we didn't know each other, so I was very careful. I wanted to, be very careful about what I said to him and how I behaved like that, because, we didn't know each other. But then he became part of the Sankirtan team, and we started going on a Sankirtan together. And you're out there working together and serving together and like that. So now I feel I could just walk up to Bhakta Jimmy and give him a big hug, punch him in the stomach a few times, and I know he doesn't mind, right? Because we're good buddies, you see? So you could do that with good buddies. You don't have, the formalities are relaxed, right? Because there's, an affection there. An affectionate relationship, so you can relax the formalities. So I think that's what the 4 Kumars are marveling at here. Because in the last thing that Krishna says, Lord Narayan says, before the 4 Kumars depart, Lord tells them, O Brahmanas, know that the punishment you inflicted on them was originally ordained by me, and therefore they will fall to a birth in a demoniac family, but they will be firmly united with me in thought through mental concentration, intensified by anger, and they will return to my presence shortly. So they're marveling at the whole relationship. They're, like, wow, it's so far. These Vaishnavas are really far out. They've got this really close relationship with Lord Narayan. And this is Vaikuntha. This isn't even Goloka Vrindavan. And that, so much so that, he's making this arrangement that they're going to, be cursed, but then they're going to go down in the material world and take 3 births and fight with me, and then they're going to come back. These Vaishnavas are really tight with Lord Narayan. And I think that's what it's meant by the marveling at the opulences of the Vaishnavas. And so let's see if I had anything more. Oh yeah, so on that same point, and this is, I think this is a valid point, because even in this world, another example of that in this world is like when there's cases of domestic violence and the police are called in, if it's a big argument between the husband and the wife, the police are very careful not to take sides. Like sometimes, it might be a thing where the husband and the wife are yelling, and they think they need to go to the defense of the wife because it looks like the husband is very angry at her, and then they go to the husband of the wife, and then the wife kind of grabs something to hit the policeman with. Because, in other words, it's superficial. In other words, you can't take it at face value. The relationship between these people, the husband and wife, for instance, is so deep that you can't. Superficially, they're fighting, and they're really fighting. They're feeling anger and everything towards each other, but it goes deep. It goes deep, and the proof of that is that when the police go to defend the woman from the husband who's apparently abusing her, sometimes the woman will turn around and try to attack the policeman. You see, so it's like that. Some relationships are, when there's a deep tie of affection there, formalities can be relaxed. An example of this is, so the four Kumars are marveling at that, the deep tie of affection between the Lord and his devotees. Prabhupada once in an airplane was with one of his disciples, I think it was Nitai, and he told him to cut a joke with the flight attendant. And the devotee, you heard this one? He told this devotee, Nitai, I believe it was, to cut a joke with the flight attendant. To cut a joke with her. And he thought, Prabhupada, I can't, I'm a brahmachari, And Prabhupada said, no, you heard it, right? No, go ahead. He was reluctant to do it. But basically, Prabhupada was giving him an opportunity to upgrade his rasa, because he was in this like awe and reverence, formality type of thing, and that's good. That's appropriate. But Prabhupada was, himself kind of, okay, no, go ahead, cut a joke with her. And but he had a difficult time to do that. But anyway, the point is there that when there's this great intimacy or affection, powerful tie of affection, then sometimes these formalities sometimes can be they're superseded by that. And so going on to the next verse now. This is text 29. Bhagavan anugavya yatam na baishtam astusam brahmateja samartopi hantum neche matam tume. I won't do the word-for-word translation, but I'll just read the translation of the purport. The Lord then said to his attendants, Jai and Vijay, so he's just finished, he was talking to the four Kumars, and now he's addressing the attendants here. Depart this place, but fear not. All glories unto you. Though I am capable of nullifying the Brahmana's curse, I would not do so. On the contrary, it has my approval. Purport. As explained in connection with text 26, all the incidents that took place had the approval of the Lord. Ordinarily, there's no possibility that the four sages could be so angry with the doorkeepers. Okay, so this is interesting. This purport's very interesting. It's pointing out a whole bunch of things that just ordinarily just wouldn't happen. The first one is ordinarily, these four sages, they couldn't be so angry with the doorkeepers. Nor could the Supreme Lord neglect his two doorkeepers. In other words, allow them to get cursed like that. Nor can one come back from Vaikuntha after once taking birth there or being there. All these incidents, therefore, were designed by the Lord himself for the sake of his pastimes in the material world. Thus, he plainly says that it was done with his approval. Otherwise, it would have been impossible for inhabitants of Vaikuntha to come back to this material world simply because of a Brahminical curse. Okay, that's a key sentence. I'm going to read that sentence again because I'm going to say something about that sentence. Ordinarily, it would be impossible for inhabitants of Vaikuntha to come back to this material world simply because of a Brahminical curse. The Lord especially blesses the so-called culprits. All glories unto you. A devotee once accepted by the Lord can never fall down. That is the conclusion of this incident. Okay, so this kind of confirms what I was, saying just previously, that there's such a bond between the Lord and the devotees that once accepted by the Lord, they can never fall down. In other words, once you're in that thick and thin relationship with somebody, then they may do something that bothers you or that you don't particularly like, or you overlook it, because that's your son, that's your daughter, that's your mother, that's your father, that's your best friend, that's your your boyfriend, your girlfriend. You do so, all right, whatever. You just kind of, no, I can't. Sorry, I can't. I don't think I could. Right, there you go. That's it. It's a fun thing. It's part of the relationship. See? So in that sense, Krishna's Prabhupada's saying a devotee once accepted by the Lord can never fall down. And that's the reason, because there's such a strong bond of affection that Krishna won't let him fall down. Even they do something wrong, Krishna's okay. Well, anyway, we'll figure it out. We'll kind of fix it up this way or that way. See? So now, the Prabhupada's saying that here, but back, just and now I'm going to lead on to another point. That, as I said, that confirmed the first point I made, this second purport. But now there is a point here. Text 37 of the previous chapter, there's a statement. And this is when the four Kumaras were about to curse Jai and Vijay. So it says here, at that very moment, the Lord, who is called Padmanabha, because of the lotus grown from his navel, and who is the delight of the righteous, learned about the insult offered by his own servants to the saints. Accompanied by his spouse, the goddess of fortune, he went to the spot on those very feet sought by the recluses and great sages. Okay, but in the purport, Prabhupada says, in the Bhagavad Gita, the Lord declares that his devotees cannot be vanquished at any time. The Lord could understand that the quarrel between the doorman and the sages was taking a different turn, and therefore he instantly came out of his place and went to the spot to stop further aggravation, so that his devotees, the doorman, might not be vanquished for good. See, so here, and that purport's kind of indicating that, well, there's a possibility that his devotees, the doorman, might be vanquished for good. But here, in this purport, it's saying that there's no question of a Brahminical curse, right? Didn't I just read that? I thought I read it in this. Did I read it in this purport? The second one I just read? Yeah, there's no possibility of a Brahminical curse. Where is it? Here it is. Yeah. Prabhupada's saying, otherwise it would have been impossible for inhabitants of Vaikuntha to come back to this material world simply because of a Brahminical curse. So that seems like a contradiction. On the one hand, it's saying there's no possibility that inhabitants of Vaikuntha can come back to the material world because of a Brahminical curse, but back here, in the previous chapter, it's saying, Prabhupada's saying in the purport that Lord Narayan instantly came out of his place and went to the spot to stop further aggravation so that his devotees, the doormen, might not be vanquished for good. So it's kind of like, well, wait a second, I thought they couldn't be, Brahminical curse couldn't do that. And here it's saying they could be vanquished for good, and there it's saying that they couldn't be vanquished. So it brings up the point of how do we deal with places where we come to in the scripture, where it seems like maybe if I thought about this more deeply, but it seems, at least to my mind, it seems like, well, that sounds like a bit of a contradiction. So how do we deal with what seems like a contradiction in the scripture, in either Prabhupada's purport or in the translation like that? Okay, well. Yeah, I've got a point here. Okay, yeah. So there's an example. Oh, yeah, right. Okay, so before I'm going to make a point, but before I do, I'm going to kind of relate an anecdote, something that happened, and read, cite a Shastric reference, okay? Before I make this point about how do we deal with like a contradiction, something that seems like a contradiction. Okay, so one time Prabhupada was in India, I believe, and Tamal Krishna Maharaj was going to see Prabhupada. So as he was walking to go to Prabhupada's room, he passed Yamuna and Madhuvisa. They were having a kind of like an argument, you know. Madhuvisa was saying there's no difference between Krishna and Balaram except for the color. You know, Balaram is white, Krishna is bluish, and he was saying that's the only difference. And then Yamuna was going, no, that's not right, because, you know, Krishna has these 6 things, or right? There's a few qualities that Krishna has, 4 qualities that nobody else has, not even Balaram. So she brought that point up, and she said, no, it says, and you know, Krishna Maharaj was kind of like a little, not bewildered, but he, wait a second, he's got a good point there, because it's, you know, it's stated in the Nectar, I think it was the Nectar Devotion, that the only difference is in the color. But she's got a good point there, because it's also stated that only Krishna has those 4 qualities, so he didn't really know who was right. So when he got to see Prabhupada, he said, Prabhupada, when he had the opportunity, presented that to Prabhupada, that Prabhupada, you know, that I just was, as on the way coming here, I just heard Yamuna and Madhuvisa were having an argument, and this was, you know, and this is what they were saying. So he presented to them. But Prabhupada, you know, Madhuvisa said this, and you know, the only difference is the color. And Prabhupada said, well, he's right. And then, but he said, but Yamuna said that, you know, there is a difference because only Krishna has those 4 qualities, and Balaram, not even Balaram has those. And Prabhupada said, well, she's right. And then Tamal Krishna Maharaj says, but Prabhupada, they can't both be right. And Prabhupada said, well, you're right. And then Tamal Krishna Maharaj said, well, who's right? And Prabhupada said, you figure it out. That's a bona fide story, right? Told by Guru Raj Maharaj here and in his book. So that's the anecdote. And here's something from the Shastra, which I'm going to share with everybody before I make the point that I want to make. Okay, so this is from the 5th canto. 5th canto, chapter 16, text 10. And the purport, Prabhupada says, there are so many mountains even on this planet Earth. We do not think that the measurements of all of them have actually been calculated. While passing over the mountainous region from Mexico to Caracas, we saw so many mountains that we doubt whether their height, length, and breadth have been properly measured. Therefore, as indicated in Srimad Bhagavatam by Sukadeva Goswami, we should not try to comprehend the greater mountainous areas of the universe merely by our calculations. Sukadeva Goswami has already stated that such calculations would be very difficult even if one had a duration of life like that of Brahma. We should simply be satisfied with the statements of authorities like Sukadeva Goswami and appreciate how the entire cosmic manifestation has been made possible by the external energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The measurements given herein, such as 10,000 yojanas, which by the way is between 50,000 and 80,000 miles, because the yojana is calculated differently sometimes. Sometimes Sariputta gave it the figure 8 miles, sometimes 5 miles, you know, but so it's 50 to 80,000 miles, 10,000 yojanas. So yeah, such figures as 10,000 yojanas or 100,000 yojanas, which is 500,000 miles to 800,000 miles, should be considered correct because they have been given by Sukadeva Goswami. Our experimental knowledge can neither verify nor disprove the statements of Srimad Bhagavatam. We should simply hear these statements from authorities. If we can appreciate the extensive energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, that will benefit us. So the point being is that, you know, we can't, with our brain, if you're a conditioned soul, if you're a liberated soul, it's maybe a different case, but for a conditioned soul, you can't use your conditioned soul mind to either, as it says here, verify or disprove the statements of Srimad Bhagavatam. If you come across something that's, you know, kind of that's bewildering or, you know, seems contradictory, just do what Prabhupada says here. He says, we should simply hear these statements from the authorities and appreciate. Appreciate. Like, wow, this is pretty far out. Just don't get into trying to nitpick. We can't, let's see, Prabhupada says something else here. We should simply be satisfied with the statements of authorities like Sukadeva Goswami and appreciate the entire cosmic manifestations. Everything's been made possible by the external energy or the energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In other words, sometimes there's a tendency, among maybe less than highly advanced devotees to you zero in on some deep, what seems like a discrepancy, and you blow it all out of proportion, but it's not a good idea. We have to remember that we're working with defective equipment. I'll give you an example. Okay, so say you're someplace and you see somebody, and it might be a member of the opposite sex or the same sex, or depending, these days everything goes kind of thing. But okay, and you're very attracted. You feel very attracted by that person you're seeing. Okay, in a material way. Okay, so you're feeling very attracted, and then you're aware that, oh, I'm feeling very attracted, but and then with your intelligence you can understand this is totally crazy. It's totally inappropriate. What my mind is being attracted to, how my mind is operating here, it's totally it's totally inappropriate. So it doesn't make any sense. So with your intelligence you can understand that what your mind is so strongly attracted to is crazy, but it doesn't stop the mind from feeling that attraction. See? So the point is, we're dealing with defective equipment. We're working with defective equipment. It's not like we, can size everything. It's not like we perceive everything the way it's, correctly all the time. Like we tend to think that, okay, when it comes to I can't think of an example off the top of my head, but we're thinking like in situations we have good judgment. I got this. I've analyzed this correctly, but maybe not. So our mind. It's one of the defects of the conditioned soul. Imperfect senses. So we make mistakes. We're an illusion, and when we try to pass that off to other people, our illusion understanding to other people, that's cheating. So we're dealing with defective equipment, and therefore we shouldn't project, or we shouldn't think that with this defective equipment, this defective mind and senses that I'm working with, then I can evaluate statements from the scripture. No, we can't. We're not liberated souls. We're not in a position to evaluate statements from the scripture. We should do like what Prabhupada says here in the purport. We should just hear them, and we should simply hear these statements from the authorities and appreciate in some way. Yet, yeah, okay, this is kind of like, wasn't a little bit bewildering to me, but so what? That's okay, So we should focus on the, focus on the ocean of mercy that we're receiving from the acharyas and the spiritual master and Vyasadeva and the whole Vedic world picture of reality, and not get hung up on, like Prabhupada gives that example about the fly. He kind of zeroes in on the, the sore, the infection, the pus, the stool, like that. That's the fly-like mentality. But as devotees, we're supposed to have like the bee-like mentality, which is the bees. They're looking for the honey. They're looking for what's good, and they're not like the flies who are looking for the pus, the sore, the obnoxious kind of thing like that. So yeah, that's an important thing to cultivate, and that's how we could deal with things when we come to the scriptures that kind of seem a little bit, whoa, how do you understand that? Don't worry about it. Just don't get hung up on it. Just you got to preach to your mind and just defeat it with these types of arguments that I'm not capable of evaluating the scriptures. This on the whole, taking on the whole, the big pictures. This is awesome. Krishna consciousness is, so wonderful in so many different ways, the philosophy, the lifestyle, everything about it, so why am I going to let myself be just, blow this all out of proportion? Not a good idea. And yeah, so pretty much that's all I have to say. So does anybody have any question about this point? Question, please? Question.
Yeah, you mentioned how we can't verify things. We just have to accept what it says in the Vedic literature. But don't devotees also try to sometimes understand things in a scientific way? Just like Prabhupada mentioned, cow dung is pure, and it's even been analyzed by the scientists as contain all anesthetic properties. So in other words, all these different statements in the Shastra, we accept them, but devotees also want to prove how these things actually are scientifically, they can be proven sometimes.
It's a comment though, right? Or no?
Huh? Well, isn't that a fact? Like in other words, he's saying we just accept, but yeah, we accept that, but also, if possible, we try to prove it scientifically. Would you agree with that, or?
What was the question part of it?
Would you agree with that?
If Prabhupada instructed us to do that.
Well, he showed by example, like he said about, cow dung is a stool of an animal, according to the Vedas.
Right.
It's pure. And then he mentions how it's even scientifically been proven that it contains all anesthetic properties. So it's been proven by science. So wouldn't that indicate that we should also try to verify the statements in the Shastra if we can, scientifically? Of course we accept them, but...
If that's your service, if you have the qualification to do that, and if that's your service, like the devotees, who are on the BI, they were given that service by Srila Prabhupada. So for them, yeah, they could delve into that. But for an ordinary devotee, no, just, accept it. Yeah, question? Yeah.
In the purport on text 29, it's a very interesting point right at the end. Prabhupada mentions that a devotee once accepted by the Lord can never fall down. What constitutes that acceptance? How does the devotee know that he's been accepted or she's been accepted by the Lord?
Well, probably best to take the humble position and not think that you're accepted. We shouldn't be going around thinking that, well, I'm accepted by the Lord, I could do anything and everything or whatever, or even if I kind of mess up, it's okay, Krishna will cover for me. No, probably that's not a good idea to be thinking like that. But, well, one way to know is if the spiritual master is pleased with you, if your superior authorities are pleased with you, that's a pretty good indication that you've been accepted to some extent. But it's, to the ultimate degree, that's kind of seems to be being implied here. One is accepted by the Lord. Well, another thing would be you might realize it if you're really fortunate and really advanced. You might actually be able to experience that. But
what about like if by pleasing? What about pleasing? Could it be that the devotee pleases the spiritual master, then is accepted by the Lord?
Yeah. If you please the spiritual master, then that's our philosophy, that it's understood that Krishna is pleased. But you got to keep pleasing the spiritual master. Yeah, go ahead, Sachin.
Yeah, I have a question.
Questions and then a comment.
Yeah, question. So, but also at the same time, the one that Swabhas asked the question, there is a verse in the Srimad Bhagavatam 10th canto where Krishna says, or where it says, Swadpada Mulasya Vayata Priyasya Tyaktena Babasya Hari Paresha Vikarmaya Chopatitam. He says that when a person fully surrenders to the Lord, and the Lord, meaning also that person who fully surrenders to the Lord gives up everything else totally and depends fully on Krishna. He says that devotee if somehow or other commits a sin, the karma, the Lord living within the heart of every living being immediately goes there to rescue that devotee, to nullify that sin. So that means like fully surrender, like the verse that we have, Sarvadharmam pariyayama, we can give up everything, I take shelter of you.
Yeah, what's the question?
So the question now is this. So that was the one comment of that. The question is that everything is about authority. We were mentioning about Mahayana, Jnana, Gatasa, Bantar. So if a person accepts a particular authority in which may contradict the other, what will that be? Doesn't that follow in your own faith? Because they can argue. You know, there are, even among our Vaishnava philosophy, we have people who sides with certain points of view than your point of view.
Yeah, well, you know, it's a hierarchy. So the idea is you have like a hierarchy of authorities. So, you know, the basic protocol is you accept your immediate authority. If there's something really that you can't handle with, you know, with your immediate authority, you could go to the next authority. You know, for instance, if your temple president's telling you something and you just think that just can't be right, you know, okay, then you could contact the GBC and, you know, present it to him and he can weigh in on it. And if you're not satisfied there, well, I don't know beyond that. I don't think there really is anything. But, you know, but we stay within the tradition. We stay within our own framework here. You know, everybody, and that's how ISKCON works. There's like a hierarchy of authority. So you work within that hierarchy of authority. You know, temple, you know, department head, temple president, GBC, you have a spiritual master, like that. Don't jump out into another tradition, or don't, like, you know, go access literatures of devotees from other sampradayas or acharyas from the past, and just stay within your lane, as Foss is fond of saying, you know. Stay within the framework that we've been, you know, brought up in, given, which is you're in a temple, you have a department head, you have somebody you're working under, and they're working under the temple president, they're working under the GBC, and they're working under the, you know, combined GBC, like that. Does that
as far as trying to figure out a philosophical point of view, it appears that ultimately comes down to who do you accept, and that you have your own faith. Because if you try to convince, for example, a Shivaist with the Vaishnavis, if you quote your Shastra and he quotes it and they quote their Shastra, they still remain fixed that Shiva is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and we say, no, Krishna is.
So that's their independence. But as far as we're concerned, you know, if somebody, a member of ISKCON, we go with what the GBC says. You know, like, for instance, on this issue of the fall of the jiva, you know, the origin of the jiva. Okay, the GBC has issued a paper. You know, there's an official document with the GBC position on that. So, as a member of ISKCON, that's what we should be going with. And if they change that, we will go with that. You know, it's not like everybody is the ultimate authority. We accept the chain of command, so to speak. That's for us. That's the way to proceed, I'd say. Okay, Amala Bhakti Maharaj.
Thanks very much for a very wonderful class, and thanks for all the devotees who have given their comments or questions. I just have one thought about the whole thing. That this is basically not to be taken, it's mentioned by Prabhupada, and this is not to be taken seriously. These are six devotees who get together, all who love one another, and as a result of loving one another, they can't hate each other, so they can't be taken seriously. It's a mock fight. It's a fun fight. It's a fight in which they all enjoy, and when it's all over, after they've slapped each other and kicked each other, knocked each other down, they hug each other in a friendly fair. So, therefore, they just walk away from the whole thing. There are no hard feelings whatsoever in this type of a fight. It's a fun fight, a mock fight, a fight that many of us guys, even women I've seen, it appears to be real, it feels to be serious, but it's not at all. There's too much love. They're all pure devotees. And as a result, they cannot have the hatred that a true fight would have.
Yeah, that's a great point. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
With your friends, grass and all this, yeah.